The night was quiet. The sky above was filled with small stars that looked like tiny silver lamps. The road stretched long and almost empty, the kind of road where silence itself could be heard. Keanu Reeves sat behind the wheel of his old but much-loved car, the paint a little faded, the leather inside worn but comfortable. It was not the newest or the shiniest car, but it was his favorite because it reminded him of simpler times. He drove slowly, not in a hurry, his hands loose on the steering wheel. The cool night breeze slipped in through the open window and brushed against his face. He liked moments like this when he could be alone, when the world seemed far away. People knew him as a superstar, a man from the big screen, but right now he was only a man driving home. Nothing more, nothing less. The city lights glowed in the distance, but this part of the road was darker. Only the moon and the few flickering street lamps gave light. His eyes wandered between the road and the shadows on both sides. The calmness gave him a rare comfort. After long days filled with cameras, fans, and scripts, this quiet drive was like medicine for his heart. Keanu leaned back in his seat for a moment, letting the hum of the engine fill his ears. He thought about the day he had, the meetings, the conversations, the endless rush of people around him, but here in this moment he was free. Just another driver on the road. He was not rich, not famous, not the man whose face appeared in theaters across the world. He was simply Keanu. He turned onto a side road where the traffic was almost gone. The tires rolled smoothly over the pavement. He tapped lightly on the steering wheel in rhythm with a soft tune playing in his mind. His lips curved into the faintest smile. He did not need a party. He did not need noise. He found peace in the small things. The car itself carried memories. He remembered buying it years ago. When he was not yet the man the world recognized, he had driven this car through ups and downs. Through lonely nights and joyful mornings, every scratch on its surface told a story. Some scratches from careless drivers, some from his own mistakes, but all part of the journey as he drove. A faint smell of gasoline mixed with the scent of old leather. It was a smell he strangely liked. It meant the car was alive, still breathing, still moving with him. Many people in his position could afford dozens of flashy cars, but he never cared for that. To him, value was not in how much money something cost, it was in what it meant to his heart. The road curved gently. Trees lined both sides, their branches swaying in the night wind. Sometimes the shadows looked like figures moving, but he did not mind. He had walked through many dark places in life. He had faced loneliness, sadness, and heartbreak. A shadow on the road was nothing compared to the storms inside a human heart. He pressed his foot lightly on the pedal, letting the car roll faster. The sound of the engine grew stronger, yet it was steady. He whispered to himself, almost as if the car was a friend. "We've been through a lot, haven't we?" His voice carried a calm warmth. He adjusted the mirror. The street behind was empty. Not a single pair of headlights, only darkness stretching back. For a moment he felt truly alone in the world, and he liked it. The kind of alone that felt safe, not lonely. His thoughts drifted to the faces of people who had touched his life. Some were still near, some had been taken away by time. Loss was something he knew well. But instead of letting it break him, he carried it gently, like a stone in his pocket, heavy but always there. This drive was one of those times he could reflect, where he could breathe without pressure. The air grew cooler. His window fogged slightly at the corners. He rubbed it with his hand and laughed softly to himself. It was a small laugh, the kind you give when you realize life is not perfect, but it is still worth living. He slowed down as he passed by an empty gas station, its lights flickering. No customers, just the quiet hum of electricity. He thought for a moment about stopping, but decided against it. His tank was still half full. His mind wanted only to keep going. Every turn of the wheels felt like a rhythm, a steady beat that matched his heartbeat. He was not thinking about the future. Not thinking about work, not thinking about the world, only about the road in front of him and the comfort it gave. The night wrapped around him like a blanket, soft but deep. His car's headlights cut through the darkness, showing him the path. He trusted it, the way he trusted life to move forward, even when the way seemed unclear. To any stranger, he was just another driver in an old car. But if they had looked closer, they would have seen the quiet strength in his eyes. The man who had lived through storms yet still chose peace. And so Keanu Reeves kept driving, steady and calm, not knowing that just ahead, the quiet road would soon roar with danger, that his simple night drive was about to change into something unforgettable. But for this moment, it was only him, the car, and the silence. The road stayed quiet for a while. Only the sound of Keanu's engine filled the air, the kind of steady hum that made the night feel calm. He had settled into the rhythm, his eyes relaxed, his mind drifting between thoughts and silence, but then, in the distance, another sound began to grow, at first faint, like a low growl rolling across the dark. He leaned slightly forward, his ears catching it clearly now. It was not the soft purr of another car. No, it was harsher, louder, broken into uneven bursts, the kind of noise that rattled the chest. The sound of motorcycle engines, many of them, their roar cutting through the still night like thunder. Keanu glanced in the rearview mirror. Far back on the road, he saw flickers of light, sharp, bouncing beams of headlights weaving across the asphalt. They moved quickly, faster than normal, and the growl of their engines grew louder with every passing second. It was not just one bike, not two, but a whole group. Maybe 5, maybe more. He kept his car steady, his hands firm on the wheel. His old vehicle was no match for their speed, but he was not afraid. He had lived long enough to know that fear often fed danger. Instead, he breathed slowly, waiting to see what these riders would do. The roar filled the road now. The once calm night was torn apart by the screaming engines. The bikers approached like wolves chasing prey. Their headlights flashed against Keanu's mirror. Stabbing at his eyes, he blinked but did not flinch. The first 2 motorcycles rushed ahead, swerving close to his bumper. Their tires screeched against the pavement, sparks flying when metal scraped too near. Behind them, more bikes followed, forming a wall of noise and light that swallowed the silence completely. One biker revved his engine so hard it echoed like gunfire. Another shouted something, his voice lost in the storm of sound. But the laughter carried clearly, cruel and mocking. Keanu could see their shadows stretching long across the pavement. Dancing like twisted shapes in the dark, they drew closer, circling him. One biker swerved to his left, the other to his right. Their bikes growled beside his car, the engines roaring so near the sound rattled through the doors. Keanu's hands stayed calm, steady on the wheel, his face expressionless. The road itself seemed to tremble under the weight of their engines. The night birds scattered, flying into the trees. Even the quiet wind seemed silenced by the furious roar of the machines. Keanu's car, small and humble, looked fragile against the pack of heavy motorcycles surrounding him. One rider sped forward and cut sharply in front of him. Forcing him to tap the brakes, another roared past his window, so close he could see the glint of metal studs on his jacket, the reflection of his grinning teeth under the helmet's shadow. Keanu's old car shook as the bikers roared past and around him, their laughter cutting into the night. To anyone else, this might have been a moment of panic, but Keanu's eyes stayed calm, watching, measuring, his lips pressed in silence. The sound of the engines was almost unbearable now, like standing inside a storm of machines. The smell of burning fuel mixed with smoke filled the air. The road that once felt like a safe blanket of darkness now became a battlefield of noise and lights. The gang seemed to take joy in their chaos. They revved their engines again and again, louder, faster. One slapped the side of his car as he passed. Another leaned close and shouted words drowned by the roar. It was not a friendly game, it was intimidation. Keanu understood. He had seen faces like this before, men who lived for power, who found pleasure in scaring others. Yet his expression did not change. His old car rolled forward, steady, refusing to stop though the wolves circled closer. The engines grew louder still, the bikers closing in tighter, their headlights flashing like angry eyes. Every roar of their exhaust seemed to demand fear, seemed to demand panic. But all they saw inside the car was a man who stayed still, who did not bow his head, who did not tremble for a moment. The leader of the group rode up beside his driver's window, his bike swaying dangerously close, his helmet glared under the light. He lifted his hand and dragged something sharp across the air, letting sparks fly. His laughter filled the night, his voice rising above the storm, daring Keanu to react, but Keanu only looked at him, not with anger, not with fear, but with the same calm gaze that had silenced many louder rooms before. The biker's grin faltered for a moment, just a moment, as if he felt the weight of that quiet stare. The roar of engines did not stop, the laughter did not fade, but under it all something else stirred, the sense that this quiet man was not like the others they had scared before. He did not honk, he did not yell, he did not beg. He simply drove forward, calm as stone in the storm. The night that began in silence was now a battlefield of sound. The bikers swarmed, their engines screaming, their lights cutting through the dark. But the man in the car did not brake. He only drove on, his calmness becoming a mystery, and soon, that mystery would shake them more than their noise ever shook him. The engines screamed louder, circling like angry beasts. The bikers were no longer just showing off. Their moves grew sharper, more reckless. One of them swerved close to Keanu's car and kicked the side door. The impact rang out like metal thunder. The old car shook, the mirror rattled. Yet Keanu's hand stayed steady on the wheel. Another biker sped up from behind, his chain swinging in the air. He whipped it against the side of the car. Sparks flew as the metal scratched across the paint. The sound of grinding steel echoed in the night. The bikers howled with laughter. The kind of laughter that came from cruelty, not joy. Keanu's car bore the blows. Its body dented, the glass vibrating with every hit. He pressed his lips together, his eyes calm but watching, measuring every move. They wanted him to panic. They wanted him to scream, but he gave them nothing. Only silence. One of the riders leaned so close to his window that Keanu could see his eyes behind the helmet. Wild and mocking, the biker slammed his fist against the glass. The car shook again, but the glass held. The biker laughed, throwing his head back and sped forward to join the others. The gang tightened their circle, riding dangerously close. Their bikes weaving in and out like predators hunting their prey. They shouted to each other. Their voices mixed with the roar of engines. It was chaos, fire and smoke in the air. The smell of burning rubber strong as their tires scraped the road. Suddenly, one biker swung his leg out and kicked the side mirror clean off. The mirror spun into the air and crashed onto the pavement, glass scattering like stars across the road. Another biker, seeing the fun, dragged a sharp metal pipe along the car's side, leaving a long scar of silver scratches. The car looked weaker now, battered and scarred, but still moving. The headlights cut through the night, steady and strong. Keanu gripped the wheel, his breath even. He could feel the anger pressing against him from outside, but inside he was still. The bikers grew louder, braver. One rode up onto the hood for a moment, his front tire slamming against the metal. Keanu tapped the brakes just enough to shake him off. The rider jumped back, laughing as if it were a game. Sparks danced where boots scraped against steel. More kicks landed. More fists slammed into the sides. The sound of metal crunching filled the air, yet Keanu did not stop. His car kept rolling forward, slow but steady, like an old warrior refusing to fall even as enemies struck from every side. A rider behind him leaned low, pulling out a sharp rod. He stabbed it at the rear light. The glass shattered, pieces flying into the night. Red sparks glowed for a second before fading. The laughter grew wilder, crueler. The pack enjoyed the destruction. For a moment, the road felt like a cage. Keanu's car trapped inside their circle of noise and violence, but still. His face stayed calm. His eyes like stone. He did not shout at them. He did not show fear. And somehow that calmness made the bikers uneasy, though they tried to hide it with more laughter. One of them sped up again. Slamming the side of his boot into the car door, the dent echoed loud like a drumbeat. The car's frame shook, but Keanu kept it straight, his knuckles tight against the wheel, his silence stronger than any words he could have spoken. The bikers expected him to fight back, to honk, to scream, to beg, but when he gave them nothing, it confused them, angered them more, so they struck harder, their bikes weaving dangerously close, exhaust smoke curling through the night air like black fog. They wanted to break not only his car but his spirit. Yet as the old car rolled forward through the chaos, something about the man inside made their cruel fun feel strange. They could damage his vehicle, but they could not shake his calm. Another blow came, another scratch, the car looked torn. But Keanu's steady driving kept it alive. The machine and the man were both refusing to surrender, their quiet strength standing firm against the storm. The bikers shouted louder, trying to cover the unease creeping into their hearts. Their laughter louder, their kicks sharper. But deep inside, a question stirred. Why wasn't he afraid? Why wasn't he broken? And though the night still roared with the sound of engines, though the car was covered with scars, the man inside sat calm, like stone in the middle of fire. And soon the bikers would learn that their power was far smaller than they thought. Keanu's car rolled to the side of the road, its body dented, the mirror gone, scratches glowing under the weak street lights. The bikers revved louder, circling like wolves who thought they had won. Their laughter echoed, the sound sharp and cruel. Yet inside the car, Keanu sat still, his face calm, his breathing steady. He turned the key. The engine quieted, and for a moment the night returned to silence except for the roar of the motorcycles. He pushed the door open slowly, the creak of old hinges swallowed by the thunder of engines. When he stepped out, he did not slam the door. He did not stomp in anger. Instead, he moved gently, standing upright, his shoulders relaxed, his hands open at his sides. The bikers expected a fight. They expected shouting, But what they saw instead was a man who carried no fear, no rage, just quiet stillness. The gang stared at him, their engines roaring beneath them. Waiting for him to react, one rider revved harder, his headlights flashing against Keanu's face. But he did not flinch, his eyes steady, his body like stone rooted in the ground. His calmness felt heavier than any scream could have been. A biker shouted from behind his helmet, mocking words drowned partly by the roar. But Keanu's silence answered louder. He stood there, neither stepping back nor forward. The streetlight above caught the lines of his face, showing not weakness but quiet strength, the kind that made even the boldest man hesitate. The leader of the gang pulled closer, his bike growling beneath him. He circled in front of Keanu, staring hard, expecting him to beg, to show fear. But Keanu's eyes never left his, steady, calm, like a mirror showing the biker his own reflection. The leader revved louder, frustrated, sparks flying from his exhaust, but still Keanu did not move. One rider kicked at the car again, denting it further, trying to force a reaction. Another slapped the hood with his hand, laughing, but Keanu only turned his head slowly, watching without anger. His silence was like a weight pressing on them. Every cruel act lost its power because the man they wanted to break did not bend. The calmness in his body spread like an invisible shield. The gang that once felt powerful began to feel small. Their noise clashed against a wall of silence. The road itself seemed to hold its breath. Keanu's stillness was not weakness, it was something greater. The kind of strength that needed no shouting. No fists? He looked at the car, its body hurt, its mirror broken, yet he showed no sorrow. He looked back at the bikers, and his eyes carried something strange, not hate, not fear, but almost pity, as if he saw through their noise, through their anger, and into the emptiness that drove them. The gang grew restless. Their laughter faded into awkward chuckles. One rider revved again, trying to fill the silence, but the sound no longer felt powerful, it felt desperate, like a man whistling in the dark to hide his fear. The longer Keanu stood calm, the more they felt the storm shifting. One biker leaned forward, pointing his finger at him, shouting words of threat, but his voice cracked. He expected Keanu to argue back, to shout, to lose control, but the man remained quiet. His calmness was not just silence, it was presence, the kind that spoke without words. The night air grew heavy, the engines roared, but even their power seemed to fade before the simple way Keanu stood. His hands by his sides, his eyes firm, his breathing slow. It was a picture they could not ignore. They had destroyed his car, but they could not touch his spirit. For the first time, one of the bikers lowered his eyes, not because of fear of punishment, but because of the shame rising in his chest. Another shifted uncomfortably on his seat, the laughter gone. The gang's energy no longer felt like victory. It felt like defeat without a fight. Keanu finally took a step forward. Not rushing, not threatening, just one calm step. And even that made the leader's hand tighten on the handlebars. The man they tried to break walked into the night with the dignity of someone untouchable. His voice finally came, soft but steady, cutting through the roar of engines like a blade through fog. He said no harsh words, no insults, only a quiet, simple question, "Are you finished?" The calmness of his tone shook them more than any shout could have. The gang that came to destroy, to mock, now found themselves staring at a man whose calm made them question their own strength. The road no longer felt like theirs, the power no longer theirs, because the one they thought would fear them refused to give them what they wanted. The silence after his words hung heavy, heavier than their noise, heavier than their laughter. The night that began with chaos was now still again, except for the engines trembling beneath men who no longer felt so sure of themselves, and deep inside they began to sense that this man was not like the others, and their game was about to turn into something else. The bikers sat on their roaring machines, the night still alive with the smell of smoke and gasoline. Their helmets hid their faces, but their laughter had faded. The calm man standing before them had unsettled the pack. They had expected anger. They had expected fear. But instead they were faced with silence and steady eyes. One of the younger bikers, who had been grinning the loudest, leaned a little closer. The light from the street lamp fell on Keanu's face. For the first time, the biker looked carefully. His eyes widened slightly. Something about the face seemed familiar. He blinked. His laughter caught in his throat. He turned his head to another rider and whispered something, his voice shaky. The others looked too. The silence gave them time to notice. The man in front of them was not just another stranger, not just another driver. The face under that soft light was one they had seen before. Not in the streets, but on screens, in posters, in stories they had grown up with. One biker's mouth dropped open. His helmet still on, but his body froze. "That's him," he muttered, his voice trembling even though the roar of the engines tried to hide it. Another biker pulled off his helmet quickly, his eyes darting between Keanu's calm face and his own memories, disbelief filling him. "Yes," the first whispered louder now. "That's Keanu Reeves?" The words spread like fire through the group. The tough gang that had circled like wolves suddenly felt their chests tighten. The laughter stopped. The noise of their engines suddenly sounded hollow. The leader frowned, trying to keep control, but even he leaned forward, his eyes narrowing as he stared. He too recognized the face, the quiet dignity, the sharp lines that had been carved into the world's memory. He had watched him in films, seen him move with strength and grace, and now the man was standing before him in the flesh. Shock rolled through the group. One biker slowly slid off his seat, his knees shaky, his voice small. "It can't be. It really is him." The others followed, their swagger gone, their helmets pulled off, faces pale. The bravado melted from their eyes. Keanu did not move, his calmness remained. But now his identity was revealed. The bikers who thought they had found just another victim now realized they had touched the car, the body, the life of a man the whole world respected. A man known not only for fame but for kindness, humility, and strength. One by one, their confidence broke. They lowered their heads, their engines quieted as throttles eased. Shame crept into their hearts like a cold wind. The night felt different now. It was no longer a playground for bullies. It was a stage where their cruelty had been exposed before someone greater than them. A biker who had kicked the mirror felt his hands trembling. He remembered the movies, the stories of Keanu sitting with strangers, giving up his seat on trains, helping people in need. This was not a man to harm. This was a man to respect. His stomach twisted with regret. Another, who had laughed the loudest, found himself unable to look into Keanu's eyes. He stared at the ground instead, his voice stumbling. We didn't know who you were." His words sounded weak, excuses against the weight of shame pressing down. Keanu finally lifted his gaze across the group, not with anger but with something deeper. His eyes carried a kind of sorrow, as if he pitied them for needing to be cruel, for wasting their power on destruction. The bikers felt smaller beneath that look than any punishment could have made them feel. The leader's chest rose and fell, his pride breaking. He had built his life on fear, on making others bow, but standing before Keanu, he felt the strange urge to bow himself, not because of fear but because of respect. Respect he had not felt for anyone in a long time. Slowly, almost without thinking, one rider dropped to his knees. His hands pressed together as if asking for forgiveness. The others stared, then followed, their knees hitting the pavement. The roar of engines gone, replaced by the sound of hearts beating fast. The sight was surreal. A gang of bikers kneeling before one calm man. The man they had tried to break now stood taller without raising his voice. Without lifting a hand, their world had shifted in a single moment of recognition. They whispered apologies, voices shaking, their words tangled and messy. Some begged, some simply said sorry again and again. Their arrogance had been stripped away. They were no longer wolves, only men who realized they had made the greatest mistake of their lives. And Keanu stood there in the night, still calm, still silent, his presence enough to turn their cruelty into shame. His identity had shattered their pride. The man they mocked had become the man they now respected, the man they feared losing the respect of. The moment stretched long, the night heavy with the weight of their realization. What had begun as a game of noise and violence had turned into a lesson they would never forget, because they had discovered who stood before them, and that truth had broken them more than any fight could have. The night air grew heavy. The sound of engines lowered to uneasy growls. One by one, the bikers who had been so loud, so fearless, now felt their strength slipping away, their pride cracking. The man they thought was just another stranger was not a stranger at all. It was Keanu Reeves, a face the whole world knew, a name they had whispered with respect in their own lives, and now shame pressed down on them like a mountain. The first biker could not take it. He slid off his seat, his knees hit the pavement hard. The others stared, their laughter gone, their smirks vanished. The man who had kicked the car's mirror followed, his legs trembling as he stepped down, his head lowered. The night that once echoed with cruel joy, now filled with the sound of knees touching the ground. The leader tried to hold his pride. He sat tall on his bike, his hands tight on the handlebars, but even he felt the weight of Keanu's calm gaze. His chest tightened, his throat dry. He knew respect when he saw it, and he could not fight it. His heart pounded as he finally swung his leg over his bike and knelt. his leather scraping against the cold road. Soon all of them were down. A line of men kneeling on the asphalt, the roar of engines silenced, the wind carrying only the soft hum of shame. The tough masks they had worn cracked and fell. They looked not like wolves but like children caught in a terrible mistake. Their helmets lay beside them, their faces pale in the weak light. Sweat rolled down brows that once grinned with arrogance. One whispered, "We're sorry," his voice so small it barely rose above the night. Another said, "Forgive us," his words shaking like leaves in the wind. Keanu stood before them, his car behind him battered and broken. Yet he looked untouched, his stillness more powerful than any weapon. He did not raise his voice, he did not point fingers. He only looked at them with quiet eyes that made them see themselves for what they were. One biker pressed his hands together, as though praying, his lips moving. Begging for forgiveness, another stared at the ground, ashamed to meet Keanu's gaze. The tough leather jackets, the roaring engines, all of it meant nothing now. It had melted into silence and regret. The street lamp above flickered, casting long shadows of men on their knees. The same men who just minutes ago had laughed as they kicked and smashed, now bowing their heads to the man they had tried to break. The ground that shook with their power now felt heavy with their shame. It was not fear of punishment that bent them. It was the weight of respect. The realization that they had harmed someone whose life was built on kindness, someone who carried pain quietly, someone the world admired for his humility. They were not kneeling to a movie star. They were kneeling to a man who had shown strength greater than theirs. Their bodies trembled, but their voices came one after another. Broken apologies, stammered words. "We didn't know. We were wrong. Please forgive us." Their sentences spilled into the night. Messy but honest, every word carrying regret. The leader, once the loudest, now could barely lift his head. His pride shattered, he whispered, "I have led them wrong. I take the blame." His voice cracked. The pack that had once followed his cruelty now saw him bend, and it broke what little pride they had left. Keanu listened, silent, his presence heavy yet calm. He did not smile, he did not frown. He simply stood as they bowed. The man whose car they had destroyed now had them on their knees, but not because he fought, not because he shouted, but because he stayed calm, because his spirit refused to bend. For the bikers, it felt like time had stopped. The road around them empty, the stars above watching, every second burned into their memory. They would never forget the night when their arrogance ended on the cold pavement beneath their knees. One rider looked up for a moment, his eyes glassy. He said softly, "We thought we were strong, but you are stronger." Then he lowered his head again, unable to face the calm man before him. The scene was surreal. Men who ruled the road by fear now bowed to a single man's silence. Their power had turned to dust, their noise into whispers, their pride into shame. The road that once belonged to them now felt like his. The cold pavement pressed against their knees, but none of them moved. None dared to rise until they felt permission, until they knew he had seen their regret. The night stretched long. Every second of kneeling felt like a lifetime, and Keanu, standing under the flickering light, remained silent, his calm more powerful than any punishment. He did not need to lift a hand. He did not need to call for help. His stillness alone had broken them. The bikers bowed their heads lower, waiting, trembling, knowing that this moment had changed everything. The wolves had fallen. The road was quiet, and all that remained was a man who stood taller without moving, and a group of men who finally understood what respect truly meant. The street was silent now, the roar of engines gone, the laughter gone. Only the sound of the night breeze carried through the empty road. The bikers stayed on their knees, their heads lowered, waiting for the man they had mocked and attacked to speak. Their bodies trembled under the weight of shame. They expected anger. They expected punishment, maybe even the police. But instead what came was something none of them could have imagined. Keanu looked at them quietly. His car stood behind him, dented and scarred, the mirror gone, scratches carved deep into the sides. Yet his eyes did not linger on the damage. He looked at the men before him, not with hatred, not with fire, but with something heavier, something deeper. His silence stretched, and every second burned into the hearts of the bikers. Finally, his voice broke the night, low and calm. "You've done enough." The words were soft, but carried the weight of truth. The bikers flinched as if every syllable struck harder than a blow. They expected curses, but there were none. They expected shouting, but his tone was steady. One of the bikers dared to lift his head, his eyes wet with regret. "We're sorry," he whispered. "We didn't know who you were." Keanu shook his head slowly, his gaze steady. It doesn't matter who I am, he said. You don't treat anyone like this, his words cut through their excuses like a blade. The truth left no place for them to hide. The leader, the man who had once guided the others into cruelty, pressed his forehead against the pavement, shame flooding his chest. We were wrong, he muttered. We thought we were strong. His voice cracked. But we were foolish. His body trembled as he knelt. Keanu's expression softened slightly, not with pity, but with a kind of tired kindness. He had seen cruelty before. He had seen loss. He had seen the dark side of people. But he had also seen what forgiveness could do. He looked at the broken men before him and spoke again. If you are sorry, then change. His words were firm but not cruel, like a father teaching grown children who had lost their way. The bikers looked at him, their eyes wide. Forgiveness was not what they had expected. Forgiveness was heavier than anger, because it left them with a choice: to remain the men who laughed at others' pain, or to rise as men who would never make the same mistake again. One rider whispered, his voice shaking, "You forgive us." After what we did? He could not believe it. The man they had hurt was offering peace instead of revenge. It was something beyond their understanding. Keanu took a slow step forward, his shoes brushing against the cracked road. The bikers tensed, but he did not strike. He placed his hand gently on the shoulder of the nearest man. The touch was light, but it burned into the rider's memory like fire. Everyone makes mistakes, Keanu said softly. What matters is what you do after. The bikers' throats tightened, their hearts heavy. None of them could lift their eyes fully to meet his. They felt smaller, weaker. Not because he had defeated them, but because he had shown mercy. Mercy when they deserved punishment. The night seemed to shift, the stars above clearer. The silence now carried meaning. The forgiveness given here would follow them for the rest of their lives. They would remember the battered car, the calm man, and the words that broke them more than any weapon could. The leader finally raised his head, his voice breaking. We swear, it won't happen again. His eyes filled with something new. Not arrogance, not pride, but respect, real respect. The kind that came from being humbled. Keanu gave a small nod, his face unreadable. Keep your word, he said, his tone calm but firm. Not for me. But for yourselves? The bikers swallowed hard. His words carved themselves deep into their hearts. Some of them wiped their faces quickly, ashamed of the tears forming. These were men who had prided themselves on fear, on never showing weakness, but tonight, kneeling before Keanu Reeves, weakness turned into strength, because they saw the power of forgiveness. The road that had been filled with violence now held a strange peace. The bikers slowly stood, their heads still low, their bodies heavy with guilt. They expected anger, but Keanu gave them a gift. He gave them a chance to walk away different men. One of them placed his hand on the dented car, his voice soft. We can fix this. We can make it right. Keanu shook his head gently. Don't fix the car, he said. Fix yourselves. The words struck them harder than any demand for repair. It was not about the car. It was about who they were. They nodded slowly, each man carrying the weight of those words. The night had begun with arrogance and ended with forgiveness. Their engines sat quiet, waiting. No longer weapons of fear, but machines ready to carry men who had been changed. Keanu turned back to his car, placing his hand on its roof, his calmness unbroken. He had faced their cruelty and given them mercy, and that mercy had shaken them more than punishment ever could. The bikers stood behind him, no longer laughing, no longer proud, only silent, humbled men, and as the wind passed softly across the road, they knew they had been given something rare, a second chance, a lesson that would stay with them until the end of their days. The night that had started with laughter and roaring engines ended in silence. The bikers stood in a broken circle, their heads lowered, their hands shaky, their pride scattered across the road like the shattered glass of Keanu's mirror. They had come to mock, to destroy, but they left with their hearts heavy, carrying a lesson they would never forget. Keanu did not shout at them. He did not curse them. He did not call the police. Instead, he gave them words they could not escape. Fix yourselves, not the car. His calm voice lingered in their minds like an echo, the kind of words that would replay again and again whenever they sat on their bikes, whenever they felt the urge to show cruelty. The leader, who once commanded them with arrogance, now felt smaller than ever. He looked at his men, their faces pale, their eyes filled with shame. He knew something had changed forever. They were no longer the same gang that had surrounded the car with chains and laughter. They were men who had been brought to their knees by respect. As they climbed back onto their motorcycles, none of them dared to rev the engine loudly. The sound of power no longer felt like power. It felt like noise, empty and meaningless. The road that once belonged to them now felt like it belonged to the quiet man who had stood calmly while they tried to break him. Keanu returned to his car. He touched the broken metal gently, almost as if to comfort it. The old machine had stood by him through the storm. Scarred but still alive, he slid back inside, started the engine, and the soft hum rose once again. It was weaker than before, but steady, the way his own heart had always been. The bikers watched him. None of them moved until he drove away, his taillights glowing faintly in the dark, the red light shrinking with every second until it disappeared completely. They stood there long after he was gone, the silence heavier than the roar of 100 engines. One of them finally broke the silence, his voice low. "We'll never be the same again." Another nodded, his hands gripping the handlebars tight. "He could have destroyed us, but he didn't." The words stung them more than any punishment would have. Forgiveness was heavier than fear, and it burned deeper. When they finally rode away, their engines no longer screamed. They moved slower, quieter, their shadows stretching across the road. Every man lost in his thoughts, their pride gone, replaced by something new, a strange respect, a vow they did not speak out loud but felt in their hearts. News of the night spread faster than they could imagine. One of the bikers told his brother, another told his friend. Soon whispers carried through the town. A gang attacked Keanu Reeves's car, but he forgave them. The story grew wings, traveling from mouth to mouth, from street to street. By the next morning it was everywhere. On phones, on screens, in conversations at cafes, people shook their heads in disbelief, not at the cruelty of the bikers, but at the kindness of the man who chose mercy over revenge. Some people smiled when they heard it, saying, "That's just like him." Others felt tears prick their eyes because in a world filled with anger, a story of forgiveness felt like light cutting through the dark. The bikers themselves could not escape it. Wherever they went, eyes followed them. Whispers surrounded them. People knew what they had done, but more importantly, people knew how Keanu had responded, and that comparison cut deeper than judgment ever could. The leader felt it most of all, once feared by his pack, now looked at with disappointment. Yet inside him something had shifted. Shame had broken him, but forgiveness had rebuilt him in a way anger never would have. He began to ride differently, slower, quieter. He told his men, "No more." And for the first time they listened, truly listened. The lesson spread not just through the gang, but through the people who heard the story. Parents told their children, "Don't judge by strength. Look at the strength in kindness." Friends shared it across tables. Strangers whispered it on buses. It became more than a tale, it became a reminder. Keanu never spoke of it again. He went back to his life, back to his quiet roads and simple car, but without knowing it. His choice that night had changed lives, not just the bikers who had knelt before him, but everyone who heard about the man who forgave when he could have condemned. The car remained scarred, the dents stayed, the scratches showed. But Keanu never repaired them fully. He left them as they were. Silent witnesses of a night when anger was defeated not by fists, not by revenge, but by calmness and mercy. And whenever someone noticed the damage and asked, he only gave a small smile, a quiet shake of his head, and said, "It's just a story." But deep down he knew it was more than that. It was proof that even in the darkest road, light could still shine. The bikers carried that night for the rest of their lives whenever their engines roared. They remembered the silence that broke them. Whenever they felt pride rise, they remembered the moment they dropped to their knees. And whenever they thought of strength, they remembered a man who showed them that true strength was not in destroying others, but in forgiving them. And so the lesson spread far beyond the street where it began. It spread into homes, into hearts, into the world, reminding everyone that respect is not demanded by fear. It is earned by kindness, that power is not in fists or engines, but in the choice to forgive when forgiveness seems impossible. That night was not just about a car, not just about bikers, not just about a movie star. It was about humanity, about the power of calm in the face of cruelty, and it would be told again and again until it lived forever as a story of kindness.